Left of the box. Hello, welcome to Left of the Box. Bonjour, bienvenue. I'm Sandy. Doug Ford called a snap election in one of the coldest months when most people are unplugged from anything politics. This is a selfish move on his part. He doesn't care about the people of this province. The last 7 years should prove that. He only cares about enriching himself and his buddies. Healthcare, cost of living, rent, scandals, education, wasteful spending by any metric has gotten worse under his watch. Now is our chance to fire him. Yet the majority of people upset by their deteriorating quality of life are going to stay home, while the worst people will go out and vote for 4 more years of this crap storm. They vote because Doug has tapped into their frustration, bigotry, and anger and is using it to mislead them about the cause of their pain. Seriously, just like the last election, Doug isn't releasing a plan. People are voting for nothing and hoping for change. I want to tap into that same frustration, anger, and pain in people who care but have unplugged from politics. So I'm going to remind you of some of the horrible things he's done and is responsible for. I'm not going to go into the details of these stories. However, I have pretty much covered all of them on my channel before. Please pause at any moment to look up the articles for more information. At the time of this recording, all the articles were available online and not paywalled. Since all images shown on screen are referenced to, not read out, I'll be making a second video for people who are visually impaired. In that video, I'll dry read, as much as I can dry read, all the headlines in order of appearance of this video. This is by no means an exhaustive list. If any of these stories upset you, vote Doug out. Here we go in no particular order. At the beginning of COVID, the military had to be called into long-term care homes to get things under control. When they arrived, they found 26 people had died of dehydration. Doug Ford spent over $200 million to scrap green energy projects already underway. It's not like there's a climate crisis or anything going on where these projects are needed to save the planet. Doug Ford wanted to rebrand Ontario and wasted money making license plates that are unreadable in the dark. What better way to tell people Ontario is open for business than spending over $100K on 25 signs? Highway 413 is being pushed forward without federal review or Indigenous consultations. Tell me, what's more important, a highway that is promised to, but won't, save you time in your car, or the environment? Oh, right. There's that whole climate crisis thing. Oh, well. During COVID, Doug Ford gave horses $2,500 a month. 2 horses to help with business interests. People relying on the Ontario Disability Support Program, ODSP, got an extra $200 a month for 3 months, if you knew to ask. Reminder, people on disability didn't qualify for CERB. Doug Ford tried to, but failed, to get Charles McVetie's right-wing Christian Nationalist College university status. But hey, it's the thought that counts. Dougie only goes this far out of his way to help the supporters he likes. During the pandemic, Doug Ford passed Bill 124, which capped the wages of public sector workers, including nurses, to 1% for 3 years. Maybe nurses should have supported him harder during his campaign to gain liked supporter status. Doug Ford canceled a curriculum rewrite that would boost Indigenous content after people spent time and money traveling to Toronto to work on it. Dougie was against CRT before it was the cool thing for right-wingers to do, a real trailblazer. Doug Ford called a Toronto Star reporter a little bitch. He denies it, but it was caught on camera. Granted, this was from before he was premier. It's not like there's a pattern of him saying degrading things towards women. Except there is. Hey, remember that time actors were hired to be PC supporters at the Ontario Leaders Debate? Back in 2018, Doug Ford canceled a basic income pilot project after it started, leaving the 4,000 low-income participants scrambling to keep their lives together. Maybe he did it because he knew the results would show it works and it would benefit the people he doesn't like, as was found in a recent PBO report. Doug Ford passed a bill to shield long-term care homes from lawsuits for the deaths and injuries of people during COVID, so long as the homes made a honest effort to follow guidelines. Remember that headline from earlier where 26 people died from dehydration in long-term care homes? Some of the service members were traumatized by what they found. So why not put the burden of proof of gross negligence on the victims instead of, holding the people responsible accountable? Instead of accountability, those same long-term care home operators got $157 million in COVID money, and their shareholders were paid another $74 million. And former Premier of Ontario, Mike Harris, who sat on the board of one of these homes, was appointed the Order of Ontario. Doug Ford reverted Ontario's sex ed curriculum back to 1989. I wonder if anything has changed since then that would be valuable for children to know and understand. He even had a snitch line to report teachers trying to teach up-to-date sex ed information. Hopefully, Dougie made up for it by investing more into education. Oh, never mind. Well, maybe he's helping teachers in other ways. I know it sounds bad that Dougie would force teachers back to work and violate their protected rights, because it is. During the last election, PC candidates had a habit of not showing up to their debates. My, how things haven't changed. Why are they so afraid to have their policies and values tested in debate? Because they're horrible, and no one would vote for them if people actually knew what the PCs are trying to do. Credit to Doug. He showed up to the two leaders' debates, then immediately left, not answering any questions in the scrums, while all the other leaders did. Hey, remember the first time Doug Ford ran for premier? He focused on making liquor more accessible. Buck a beer, remember that? Good times. Only it ended up costing people more. It'd be silly for him to focus on liquor again, especially if it would end up costing the taxpayers $612 million to simply speed up the expansion of alcohol to stores. Another one of the first things Doug Ford did when he got into office was to get rid of rent controls. How's that going? Average rent for a one-bedroom in Ontario is almost $2,000 now. Did you know the max someone relying on ODSP can get per month is $1,468, and for Ontario Works it's $733? Doug Ford should probably look into raising the rates to cover basic needs. Oh. All the other parties have promised to double ODSP, by the way. That will literally save lives, yet Doug Ford is refusing to do it. Something that happened, which many people may have forgotten about, that time when Doug Ford redrew Toronto's political boundaries 2 months before a municipal election after many candidates had already declared and were campaigning. Why? He did it to settle old scores. Conservatives love to claim they want smaller government, so I'm sure Dougie hasn't mucked around with other municipal issues. Right, there's that, and that, just to name a few. Another way Doug Ford has pushed his agenda on cities was by shutting down 10 of the 17 supervised consumption sites in Ontario. He didn't talk to the people running the sites first. Experts did not recommend closing them. Faith leaders urged him to reverse the decision. This may even violate people's charter rights. But Doug did it anyway, using the excuse that they were near schools. Remember that unnecessary $612 million expansion of alcohol? That includes locations next to schools. These closures will cost lives. Oh, hey, a little while ago I mentioned fake supporters. Well, there were also fake invoices sent out in an attempt to secure donations. COVID was horrible. At least Doug Ford was on top of that. Oh, right. It's not like that was on purpose. Oh, that. But he wouldn't completely abandon us. Only he did. Well, that was COVID. It's not like he'd abandon us if a city were to be under siege for almost a month by right-wing freedom truck convoyers. Yeah. But if you want, you can join him in cottage country for the low price of $750 a day in the off season. That old cottage is next to a much bigger cottage he had built on his salary as premier. Doug Ford is a fan of catering to American billionaire-owned corporations like Amazon at the cost of protected wetlands. But that's not all. He's spending $100 million of taxpayer money for 15,000 households to get high-speed internet with Elon Musk's Starlink, a contract which he ripped up over the threat of Trump tariffs, then later that same day put it back on. And to put that in perspective, it breaks down to roughly $6,667 per unit, while Starlink kits at retail cost about $500 per unit. That's one hell of a tip to a billionaire when Canadian companies are available to meet the needs of the people. Such a good businessman. Oh, and there's the $11.7 million he's paying Staples, an American company, to take service Ontario locations. Are these additional locations? Nope. Privately run ones which are being closed and relocated, which means people are losing their jobs. Doug Ford once accused Indigenous MPP Saul Mamakwa of jumping the line to get vaccinated in a northern Indigenous community, to which he gave a half-hearted apology. Under Doug Ford, the MPP housing allowance, that's just the amount extra given to MPPs for housing, went up by 20% to $2,300 a month for just housing. You see, I'm emphasizing that because remember what I said about ODSP and OW rates? MPPs get twice the amount for housing than we get to cover the cost of everything. Surprising no one, Doug Ford's housing policies and lack of caring for vulnerable people has led to the population of tent encampments to skyrocket to over 80,000 in 4,100 encampments across the province. If all the unhoused people in encampments were counted as a population center, it would be the 18th largest in Ontario, right between Peterborough and Belleville, out of 299. Dougie's brilliant way of dealing with the unhoused crisis he caused? Goading the mayors of cities to ask him to violate the rights of people by using the notwithstanding clause to throw unhoused people suffering from addiction into prison. That's prison, not treatment. Forcing people into treatment against their will, also not cool. And if he can't jail them, he wants to fine them up to $10,000 for having nowhere else to go. Yep, totally makes sense and is the compassionate thing to do. But it's best to deal with the root causes leading to people becoming unhoused in the first place. In this case, it's having Doug Ford as premier. Did you know Doug Ford is currently under investigation by the RCMP for the Greenbelt scandal? You may recall while campaigning back in 2018, he was caught on video making backroom deals to sell it off while telling the public he wouldn't do that. But then he did try to sell it and got in trouble and had to backtrack. Then, during a leaders' debate, when he was asked about it, he said, and I quote, "I think I was pretty clear. I said I was, and then I wasn't, and then I went ahead and did it. But in saying that, I apologize to the people." Sorry about that knife. I thrust it into your back. Unfortunately, I can't take it back, and the damage is done. Doug Ford, liar, liar, Greenbelt on fire. Gee, it sure is a good thing we have police oversight in the province, making sure the powerful are held accountable. All right. Well, Doug Ford is a fan of the police because they're fans of him, even going so far as publicly endorsing him. Totally okay for the people who are supposed to be tackling crime endorsing someone under criminal investigation. But can you blame them when Dougie buys them all the best toys? Like spending over 100 million on 5 police whirly-birds. That's it. That's how Doug Ford solved crime in Ontario. Not by tackling the root causes, but by having more of what tourists seek out when visiting Niagara Falls. Speaking of scandals, the Auditor General found the Ontario Place redevelopment is not fair, transparent, or accountable and will cost more than $1.8 billion. Ontario Place, where almost 900 trees were removed a bit before winter, destroying the habitat of wild animals that have nowhere else to go in the middle of Toronto. Doug literally did the song, Pave Paradise, put up a parking lot. Ah, yes, the luxury spa that will cost taxpayers millions of dollars for a foreign company to replace Ontario Place, previously a fun family destination. Now the family can enjoy getting a mani-pedi together. Such quality bonding time. The Ontario Science Centre, another go-to place for families, was shut down, a thing no one wanted to happen other than Dougie and some of his wealthy friends for reasons. The claim the roof needed repairs, a whole 6% of the panels were at high risk of collapsing. Snow on it might be bad. Well, that might was proven wrong. Most people in Ontario know it's been snowing like crazy this month. The Science Centre roof? Yeah, it's just fine. It didn't need to be shut down. Speaking of the roof repairs, it would have been cheaper to fix them than shut it down and move it, costing dozens of people their jobs. More buildings in need of repairs. Schools. But where's the money for all of this? In the same place, Doug Ford found the money to build a tunnel highway under a highway. Initial estimates of the cost for the approximately 55-kilometer long tunnel, which would be the largest infrastructure project in the world, was $60 billion. But realistically speaking, experts say it's going to be closer to $100 billion. I should be clear, this is a child's fantasy of a futuristic world. Between cost, size, and environmental destruction, it's never going to happen. And this project wouldn't stop traffic jams, it just means you'd be stuck in a traffic jam. Underground. Did you know 2024 was the worst year for Ontario ER closures? 1 out of every 5 hospitals with an ER or urgent care center had unplanned shutdowns. So remember, folks, only have a medical emergency during irregular business hours. But so long as you can get to another ER, you'll be fine. Oh, that. But you can still go to a family doctor, right? Hundreds lining up for a chance at a family doctor? I mean, how bad could it actually be? 2.5 million people in Ontario without a family doctor, huh? But Dougie is working on getting us more doctors, right? Oh, okay. He's using pharmacists to fill in the gaps of his failures. But we can still be seen in a timely manner, right? Right? According to Michael Hurley, president of the Ontario Council of Hospital Unions, first vice president of CUPE Ontario and member of CUPE's National Executive Board, 2,500,000 people are waiting for surgeries, 50,000 are waiting for long-term care beds, and only 3,500 of the promised 15,000 long-term care beds were created. And there's 1,850 people on stretchers in hospital hallways. But still, this is Ontario, Canada. We get our healthcare needs met. But Doug is taking this seriously, isn't he? His smug rich buddies standing next to him thought that joke was a hoot. It feels like a lifetime ago, but it was only back in 2020 that Doug Ford tried to force businesses to promote his political agenda. Oh hey, check out this snippet from Doug Ford's Wikipedia page. While Dougie promised a balanced budget in 2018, the Ontario debt has increased by $86 billion since he took office. A much greater increase than his predecessor, whom he said tisk tisk to for causing debt. Dougie's good business acumen is really paying off. his rich buddies. You know how most Canadians have no interest in our healthcare turning into American-style system? Doug Ford isn't one of them. But I can't say I'm surprised Dougie is a fan of American-style politics when he has said it out loud in front of cameras, both intentionally and when he thought no one was listening. And his plan of underfunding healthcare so people become so desperate for a solution to listen to his BS, even though the solution is more funding to our public healthcare, not less, is well underway. Doug Ford spent a record amount on government ads, so why not spend millions more on ads targeting a U.S. audience, including sponsoring Sean Hannity's show on Fox News for a Trump-Musk interview. Hannity, Musk, Trump, who are threatening the sovereignty of this country, wanting to start a tariff trade war, are racist, bigoted, fascists, really three of the worst people on earth. And Dougie is trying to get into their good graces by giving them millions, even hundreds of millions of Ontario taxpayer money. That boot Doug's licking must be very tasty. How many licks till you reach the sole of the foot? Doug Ford knows. Oh, right. Doug Ford's cabinet, the largest in Ontario's history with 36 ministers. They all get a lovely little pay bump with that title. Gotta love that small government. Here's another solution to the housing crisis Doug Ford has in mind. Soon that doghouse in your backyard will count as a home. I wonder what that would do to zoning and property taxes. Doug Ford once said, "We need people from all around the world, but he only wants the hard-working ones. You come here like every other new Canadian. You work your tail off. If you think you're coming to collect the dole and sit around, it's not going to happen. Go somewhere else." Dougie didn't see the issue with that statement and refused to apologize. He also suggested immigrants were to blame for a shooting at a Jewish school, despite the police saying they had little information on the suspects. Yeah, Doug Ford, we don't need to imagine the kind of horrible person he is. He tells us. Like when Dougie told homeless people to get off their ASS and get a job because jobs for people who are unhoused are so readily available. Or when he said people on OW were sitting around watching the Flintstones because when you get $733 a month, you're living large and don't need to stress about money. Well, that might have been the case if you were getting $733 back when the Flintstones was originally airing. A reflection as to how bad the cost of living has gotten in Ontario under Doug Ford? Food bank usage has soared. Something as basic as buying groceries is now a luxury. So just how bad can Doug Ford's trash talking get? What's that? He denies defaming MPP Sarah Jama? He tweeted what out? Miss Stiles has yet to hold Miss Jama accountable for publicly supporting the That tweet, by the way, is still live on his account. Surely it can't get any worse than that. During a campaign speech at, brace yourself, a police gala, Doug Ford on stage said about home invaders, "God forbid they kill an innocent person. I don't even go 25 years. I send them right to Sparky and then we'll take everything from there." You can't. St. Anne's is closed. Ooh, deep cut. So I get it. He joked about the death penalty, just like Donald Trump jokes about making Canada the 51st state. To be fair, Dougie said he was against the death penalty after his joke didn't land. You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how Doug Ford has given us stimulus payments. Like how he scrapped the license plate sticker renewal fees and gave out refunds right before the last election, which means $1.1 billion less going into provincial coffers. And oddly, just on time for this election, he's spending $3 billion sending out $200 checks to everyone, even people who aren't alive. If that's not generous, I don't know what is. So that means there's more than $4 billion less going into things like Healthcare, schools, social services, advertising, Elon Musk, American corporations, and toys for the police. Seriously, that money could have gone towards covering not even 2 kilometers of his highway under a highway tunnel. So really, were his bribes worth it in the end? Are you angry yet? Mad enough to bring people with you to vote Doug out? If not, you may be one of those deceased people getting a $200 check. Okay, I think that's about it. Again, this isn't an exhaustive list. You can find more on the Ford tracker provided by the Ontario Federation of Labor. Notice how I didn't mention much about tariffs? You know, the whole thing Dougie is basing the need for the election on? And that's because while the provinces are impacted and should be included in negotiations, it's primarily a federal concern. Hence why none of the other premiers felt it necessary to call an election. Not to mention, if the claim is you need a stable government to deal with this crisis, why throw things into a blender when, by the time the official election date was to be called next year, the tariff issue would most likely be solved? Doug doesn't need a strong mandate to handle it. He's already in the position to handle it. Ask yourself objectively, have the last 7 years been better for you, or have things been getting worse? If they've been getting worse, vote for anyone but Doug Ford. 57% of people stayed home during the last election, giving Doug a majority with only 18% of possible votes. We have the ability to change that by going out and voting. I get Marit Stiles and Bonnie Crombie aren't exactly energizing people to go out in the cold to get to the polls. You may feel like they have nothing to offer you. Fine. Don't vote for yourself. Vote for the most vulnerable people in the community. All parties, except for the Conservatives, have promised to double ODSP. Having any other government in power will save lives and improve the quality of life for millions. I endorse ABC voting. Anyone but conservative. Check out smartvoting.ca to learn which candidate in your riding has the best chance to beat the Conservative. Advance polls are open, and you can vote at your local electoral office anytime it's open. If you have a disability and need assistance to vote, contact your electoral office or local party associations, and they will assist you. To support my work calling out the people in power, please subscribe to my channel or become a patron. I'm a nonpartisan progressive, so I don't just pick on conservatives. I'm not a fan of any of the parties, but some, like the Conservatives, are much worse than others. Like and share this video so it gets out to as many people as possible before the election on February 27th, and join me for live coverage of the results. The stakes couldn't be higher. Doug Ford's government is responsible for a staggering amount of social murder. Don't give this monster another 4 years to make things worse. Salut, à la prochaine! Thank you for watching and stay tuned. I'm Sandy, wishing your tomorrow is better than your today.